In this clip, we're hearing the story, the foundational story that goes with the curriculum, Our Golden Thread, about Jesus' nonviolent love, Gospel Nonviolence, curriculum materials. The ways of God are unchanging. They are one continuous act of love. It's not as if love flows from God. Love is God, and God is love. In God's overwhelming love, God wanted to share love. So God created human beings, creatures like God, capable of understanding and capable of love. When the human being wandered away, God, in his overwhelming, forgiving love, said he would send the light, his word. The word that he sent that would help us know how to live is Jesus, God's Son. When Jesus was on the earth, he said many wonderful, beautiful things. He said things like, "Blessed are the poor in spirit." He said, "I am the way, the truth, and the life." He said, "The Father and I are one. As the Father loves me, so I love you. Remain in my love." The disciples' hearts must have been burning inside them when they heard Jesus say these things. "I'm the good shepherd. I call my sheep by name. They know my voice, and they follow me." But sometimes Jesus talked about a kind of love that was confusing to the disciples. He said, "Love your enemies. Do good to those who hate you. Bless those who curse you." This was confusing to the disciples, but Jesus didn't let their confusion change his path. He continued to teach the way of nonviolent love of friends and enemies. And the disciples always saw Jesus loving anyone, everyone, Jews, Gentiles. Always Jesus was loving. Jesus' actions also showed this nonviolent love. Do you remember how he entered Jerusalem? The people were spreading palm branches on the road, their cloaks. They were singing, shouting, and they saw Jesus coming, and there he came, and he was riding on a donkey. He was not on a beautiful horse like a conquering political military hero. He wasn't wearing the garb or carrying the weapons of that kind of leader. Jesus came with humble love, nonviolent love, and he came to show us how to live that love. Shortly before the end of Jesus' life and the feast of Passover, the feast of freedom for the Jews, Jesus wanted to give his disciples a gift. And he did that. During that meal, he said the words that the disciples had been hearing their whole lives. But while he was holding the bread, he said, "This is my body." And while he was holding the cup, he said, "This is my blood. Do this, remembering me." Jesus was giving the gift of himself to nourish us so that we could become love and do the deeds of love as he did. Jesus' evening continued from there, as it had often continued, with the disciples going to the Mount of Olives to pray and sing. But this night was different. On this night, something terrible happened, and I'm sure you know most of what it was. Jesus was taken away by the guards. While that was happening, one of his disciples did something that Jesus had to stop. He took out his sword and he slashed out at the guard taking Jesus away. He cut off his ear. Jesus had to stop it. He said, "Put that sword away. That's not how we act." And then he did a most amazing thing. He healed the ear of the man taking him away. Where have you heard of a leader in battle healing the enemy? But that's the way Jesus lived, and that's what he taught us. Well, his night did continue. It was a terrible night. He was beaten badly. He was humiliated. He was crucified, and he died. But that is not the end of the story. 3 days later, Jesus rose from the dead. Christ is risen. Alleluia. It was amazing to the disciples. He hugged them. He looked deeply in their eyes. He spoke to them. And his love was there and the joy was there. Christ is risen. Christ is risen from the dead, and by his death he has trampled upon death and has given life to those who were in the tomb. Jesus was saying, my way of nonviolent love is the way that brings love and joy and peace to everyone. It's the way that brings God filling everything. It's the way that will bring parousia, God all in all. Well, the disciples still were having some trouble with this. And Jesus told them he would send some help. So after he had returned to the Father, they were meeting in a locked room because they were afraid. But it happened. Suddenly, there was as if a strong driving wind, tongues like fire resting on the disciples, and they were filled with the power of the Holy Spirit. They were unafraid. They didn't hesitate to speak about Jesus. They went out from there knowing that they had the good news, the news of nonviolent love that heals everything. The disciples changed how they lived together. Something with that power of the Holy Spirit added a new energy. Now they held things in common. They shared with anyone. There was a powerful sense of community between them. Non-believers saw that and said to themselves, I want to be part of that. And other people became followers of Jesus. Well, you might think this was wonderful and that everybody wanted this and was happy about it, but that is not so. There were some people who were very upset by what the apostles were saying and doing. One of the people, Stephen, who was a great preacher, was in the temple preaching about Jesus. And some of the people asked him what he was saying. They did not like Stephen's answer. They forced Stephen out of the temple, out of the walls of the city, outside the city, where they could kill him. While Stephen was dying, he said words similar to what Jesus said when he was on the cross. Father, forgive them, they don't know what they're doing. And this is not surprising, because Stephen was part of the enemy-loving community. And some people noticed this and remembered it, and they wanted to be part of that enemy-loving community. And Jesus' work continued with the growing numbers. So when Stephen had died, someone else picked up the work he was doing. The same with all the other apostles. They moved out from Jerusalem, spreading through the lands there, bringing Jesus' voice, Jesus' hands, Jesus' love. As they died, new followers came forward and took over the work. And this has continued kind of like a golden thread through history. God is nonviolent love. He sent his son Jesus, who showed the way of nonviolent love in a way that human beings can understand. Human beings lived that love, and through the centuries, there has always been God's nonviolent love available, changing the world.